It's your tour guide around the Slacksea Wells.
How long the tour bus, so let's go. Wednesday and Sunday out when you can take the tour.
Hop on now, we starting out. Texas land, the Panthers shout. Tigers roar and deserts drought. What's that whisper? Ain't no doubt. Next to Boot got Jacks to see. More tigers prowling, making others flee. Arkansas, a quick short spree. Golden Lions, they run free.
How long the tour bus, so let's go. Wednesday and Sunday out when you can take the tour.
We love the sip, so we raising cheers. Delta doubles, fueling fears. Braves and Tigers through the years. Echo loud in crowded spheres. Swing through Bama, hear them call. Hornets buzzing, stand up tall. Bulldogs barking in the hall. Feel the rhythm break or fall. Sunshine State, we ending last. Rattlers creeping, moving fast. Join the chorus, make it blast. Wildcats past and future, hold it fast. Swag stories on the stage. Every chapter turning page.
All right, everybody, what is going on? How y'all doing? Welcome to today's edition of Swag Talk, the show we cover the swag inside and out. Of course, I am your tour guide around the swag Seawells coming at you. And today we're gonna just take a quick reaction to the Southern Spring game which took place today. Um, so we're just gonna I'm just gonna get some few thoughts on what I saw. And then we'll get up out of here. So y'all make sure y'all hit those socials: Facebook is Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76, Instagram Swag Talk. And don't forget to like the video, comment, and share. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to become a part of the Swag Talk fam, man. So we got, like I said, we're not gonna prolong this. This is not gonna be anything that's super long and super in depth. That out. And so shout out to everybody else, man, that I saw at the game, man. It was great catching up with everybody. But talking Southern Spring game, man. First and foremost, I think the one thing that a lot of people always look at in this kind of situation is, the quarterback play. I thought Jalen Woods was solid. Obviously, going against your own defense, they kind of got an idea what you can do, and the fact that you can be touched and be down, that can kind of change a few things. But I thought he showed a good growth from where he was last season. Obviously, you don't really know until you get into a game, but just looking at a guy that's going from his redshirt freshman year to redshirt sophomore year, I thought he took some good steps. He looked like he looked like he's taking command of the offense, and he looked like a guy who is the number one guy on the depth chart. That's not to say that he got the job locked up. That's not to say that he's gonna be an all sweat guy or nothing like that. But I'm just saying, just looking at him, he looked like he had a good handle on everything. Like he got he put on some muscle, got a little bit bigger. Just seemed a little bit more confident. And I think knowing that at least at this point you are the guy, I think that helps a lot with that kind of confidence and just being a year older and actually having game experience. So I think he looked good. He had some off throws here and there, but he also made some good throws. He had a couple of touchdown drives, and so I thought he looked solid. Jamari Jones, he looked pretty solid as well. He was more of a threat with his legs. so he was able to extend a couple plays and even get out of the pocket. He had a play that probably would have been a short touchdown on an RPO, but the tight end dropped the ball. Um, I thought he did a good job. Of course, there were some procedure penalties and things like that with him running offense because this is first, real action in this kind of setting with this offense. So he's still learning the offense and learning the guys. But I thought he made some plays here and there. He led Southern to that first touchdown drive on a big pass play to Darren Morris, who had a really solid game as well. Um, and I think, last season I said Darren Morris would be the breakout guy. He didn't really have like a super great season numerically, but he made some big plays here and there. I think consistency wise, I think he has the ability to take it to another level. And if he can, be that guy, I think that's going to help this offense a lot because he is a guy that can make plays down the field. He is a guy that can catch the ball and catch it in space and then break it for a long game. And he had a few plays like that. He had a big touchdown against Alabama A&M on the slant that he was able to take to the house. And so, I think him working that way and Dupree Fuller, also another guy who was a big target last year at tight end. I thought he had some good plays here and there, which is kind of what he does. I think he didn't look any um he didn't take any steps back right now. Um and so, those are guys who combined for 67 receptions last season and about 800 about close to 800 yards between the two of those guys. Also, they combined for 5 touchdowns. So that was honestly the bulk of your production. So, you're definitely looking for those two guys to make some plays. I know Cam Jefferson made a couple catches in there. Um, the running game, they didn't really run much. I mean, they were limited on numbers at running back right now. So, you didn't really see them do a lot of running, but Jason Gabriel, he looked like he's a guy who was a freshman last year, got a little bit of action, actually ended up redshirting, but he was a guy who um, put on some more weight. He's not the biggest guy, but he put on a little bit more weight and was able to kind of make some things happen. And they ran the ball here and there, not a lot. Of course, when Jamari Jones was out there, he had a couple carries, which I think would be a factor if he was to play in that spot. An offensive line, they held their own. I think they looked a lot better in this spring than they did last spring, which is understandable. There's a lot of guys who played a lot last season are back, so the unit is a little bit more cohesive than it was last season. Now they got beat on at tackle a couple of times, but when you blocking Kelby Givens, you're gonna give up those plays here and there. And speaking of the defense, I think the defense was Southern's defense. I think they tackled well in space. They gave up a couple big pass plays, but nothing major. They made the plays in space that they needed to make. Of course, the defensive line got a lot of pressure. The linebackers led by Vince Page, they look pretty solid as they try to find that guy who's going to step into that Derek Williams role. But I thought Vince Page looked solid. I thought Kelby Givens was disruptive at times. I know Herman Brister had a couple of times that he came off the edge from his safety spot. And again, there's a lot of new guys in on that defense. So, you're still kind of learning who everybody is, but I thought they looked pretty solid. I didn't think they gave up. They didn't really give up a lot of big plays, and I thought when they did give up a catch, they made sure to get the guy on the ground, and just kind of make plays like that. So I thought as a whole, I thought Southern, they looked a lot. They look more of a team that is coming off of a good season. And they look like a team who understands what's in front of them. It's way too early to say, where they at. Of course, there's still a lot of stuff to work on. And like I always say, I don't expect to come out of a spring game, just, ranting and raving about how great anybody is, because I think, you can't really tell working against, your own guys. And so, I thought, I didn't see any glaring deficiencies. And I didn't see any, issues where, more reps and more depth will help a position. I think the guys at running back that they got right now are guys that are gonna be factors, but of course, you want to have more depth at that spot, and then, they're getting those guys in. So this is not a finished product, obviously, but I think that they look pretty good. There were those hiccups. There was face mask penalty, um, personal foul for hitting the quarterback. I think there might have been a hole or two, uh, three or four false starts. And so it was just kind of a little bit of a herky jerky at times. And like I said, that's to be expected. You lost some guys who played a lot last season. You lost your top three running backs. You lost two of your quarterbacks. So this is a lot of turnover. But I think this may be a season where you don't have to juggle that spot. Now I do expect Jamari Jones to battle for that position in the fall camp. But I think with Woods going in and coming out as the starter, or at least as the number one guy right now, we'll put it that way, and going into fall camp as the number one guy. I think you'll see him continue to develop. He got a good head on his shoulders, and he seems to be able to put the ball where it needs to go. He's making better reads and just looking a little bit sharper um, in action. But all in all, like I said, I thought it was a good day. The weather was great. It wasn't as hot as it was last year. And I thought all in all, it was a good performance for what you're looking for. So, like I said, I'm coming out of this game, I'm satisfied with what I saw. Of course, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still going to be some more pieces added. Just like everybody else team, everybody adding guys after spring. So it's always going to be a few new faces. Once you get the fall camp, but this unit that they had was good. So all in all, I'm satisfied. Um, I'm not gonna put anything anything out there because it's way too early for those kind of predictions. But like I said, I'm just looking forward to seeing guys continue to take those steps. Going into a season with an offensive line that's in better shape than it was at the beginning of last year, I think is going to be a big thing for you. Um, it's something that you won't have to spend, your first three or four games trying to work out. Like I said, Southern's going to run the ball, so there are guys on the roster who can do it, and they're obviously going to have more guys at that spot. And if I had to say offense, the spot that is the question mark right now would be the running back spot because just for depth and experience, there's not a lot of guys with experience back there. And so, maybe you get an older guy out the portal that can kind of plug and play. Receivers have been, what they are. Southern's offense is not necessarily an offense that's just going to air it out. So you don't, you just need guys that can make those plays when the time is there. Um, I would expect the passing offense to be more consistent as the season goes on. Um, that's something that I would love to see, and of course the turnovers getting cut down. Um, so for now, man, like I said, for now it was a good takeaway. I didn't come out of it with a ton of questions. Came out of it at this point pretty content. So that's kind of where we stand. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. We'll be back tomorrow with a video on the top returning running backs for each team in this coming into the 2025 season. So y'all keep it locked here for that, and then we'll catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.